The Oklahoma Sooners are reuniting with a former offensive coordinator.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com. He's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jay, the Oklahoma Sooners are reuniting with a former offensive coordinator. That's Kevin Wilson is coming back to be an analyst on the team. Most recently was the head coach at Tulsa. Prior to that, spent several years with Ohio State. Before that, he was the head coach at Indiana. The dude knows offense, Jay.
This is a lot smarter pickup than people want to give props for, John. And it's not because Oklahoma desperately needs somebody else on the offensive side of the ball. No, having experience on your staff is invaluable, especially someone that's had multiple stints at head coach. Granted, they were not the most successful, but lessons were learned, just like Loki would say. I will call experience. Right. And it's something that's needed because you're bringing Ben Arbuckle in, and if Brent Venables is going to actually run things on the defensive side of the ball, call the plays, be the play caller, and be focused on that, you're going to need someone that's going to be able to help with managing the time. Brandon Drum had mentioned this in a post on the social medias about the pickup of Kevin Wilson, and the biggest point is that Marcus Freeman had himself a veteran guy there at Notre Dame with him as well. Can't think of the name. He mentioned it, but I can't remember the name off the top of my head now. But that person helped him with game management throughout the game. Marcus could focus and help with defense as needed, but it helped with the offensive side of the ball. Ben Arbuckle is young, John. He's still trying to, he's done good things. We've seen him put up good numbers. But he's still got to learn how to manage the time and stuff without someone fully overseeing him. And I think that adding Kevin Wilson just does nothing but provides an additional mind to pick as they prepare for the games next season.
Well, this is also a guy that you can have in the booth on the sideline, helping with go for it situations. Are we going for it on 4th and 1 in this situation? Helping with time management. We know that Brent Venables has had an issue with some of the game management aspects, and that's a lot of people's concerns about him taking over the defensive coordinator spot and calling the defense and game planning and all that. People are concerned about his ability to manage the game. I totally think that that's a fair critique of Brent Venables. So you bring in a guy like Kevin Wilson, who has been a long time coordinator at the collegiate level, has had a lot of success in college football, both in the Big 12 and in the Big 10. And to me, it's a plus. You also get a guy that's got experience coaching offensive lines. He's got experience coaching tight ends, areas that you were a little bit weak at in 2024 and you need to get better at. So to me, it's a plus pickup for the staff. You lost JP Lossman to Washington, going to be their assistant quarterbacks coach up there. But I think that you get something in Kevin Wilson. Let's not forget, he was the guy at the helm in 2008 when Oklahoma just went on this tear offensively. They averaged over 50 points per game. They had 6 games at the end of the season where they had more than 58 points scored per game. And Sam Bradford goes and wins the Heisman Trophy. This is a dude that is a very, very good offensive coordinator. How much he's going to be involved in the game planning week to week, we'll see. But to have another experienced mind on your staff, I think is going to be beneficial. Look at what they did at Ohio State and now he wasn't the full-time play caller, but he was a co-offensive coordinator along with Ryan Day under Urban Meyer, and they were very, very successful. He was still one of the co-offensive coordinators under Ryan Day, and they were very, very successful. So I like the addition. The dude's going to help in game planning. He'll help in game management. There are going to be a lot of ways in which this addition helps the Sooners.
No, I totally agree with that. And even to add to that part, let's think about it this way. Go back to Kevin Wilson's first stint here at Oklahoma. We talked about this and the way that they forged a player like a Sam Bradford in fire. He was here, with Jason White. He's been here for a while. And so he was able to help with mold a lot of those guys into, Heisman Trophy winners. Now, granted, I'm not saying that this is an opportunity for them to mold John Materia into one, but I'm also not saying that, mainly because you bring in a guy that has the experience, that has been able to help propel a quarterback, someone that was kind of under the radar, guys that were under the radar and guys that people really didn't, that were really overlooked. He's able to build them into something special, and we saw that produce on the field. And so he's going to be able to do that while helping Ben Arbuckle, because we all know Ben Arbuckle is going to be the man in charge regardless. I've saw some fans on social media, saying, well, Kevin Wilson wasn't successful as a head coach. Why would you bring him in? You got to remember, this is what Nick Saban did all the time. This is literally how he lived. He constantly found as many coaches as possible, brought him into the Nick Saban School of Coaching Rehabilitation, got them back on their feet, got them other jobs. Now, granted, that's not saying that this is what's going to happen here, but if Oklahoma produces on the offensive side of the ball as we expect, even at a decent level, there's a very good chance that a school that fires their head coach is going to come after Ben Arbuckle. They're going to, because that's what happens here. We've already seen that DeMarco Murray they were trying to poach him to Penn State. Ohio State tried to get him the year before. Oklahoma has coaches that teams covet. Todd Bates was one that teams have been going after for the last couple of years. Miguel Chavis the same way. Brandon Hall was getting some calls. Oklahoma has been, the staff itself, Emmett Jones, teams want them. Teams want them as their coaches and position coaches, coordinators. They're trying to get their hands on some of these guys if they can. And so because of that, Oklahoma is going to have to do what it takes to have additional coaches in the reserves. Brent Venables has to prepare himself for the chance he's going to lose coaches. So with Kevin Wilson coming in, not saying he's going to end up becoming the offensive coordinator if Ben Arbuckle leaves. No, I do think that Venables will go out and get somebody that's more younger, a little bit younger, someone more innovative, or someone that's coaches more towards the times, I guess you could say, John. But I think the thing to think about is that this is going to give Ben Arbuckle an additional component or brain to pick as he's trying to navigate himself through the SEC. Because Kevin Wilson's got Big Ten experience, which is just as physical as the SEC, and we're learning that. I mean, they just won the last 2 national championships. So why not have a guy that has experience in that and dealing and playing against SEC schools as well?
It's easy to look at the head coaching experience and kind of poo-poo the hire. Totally get it. Yeah. How many great defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators turn out to be great head coaches? It's not a 1-for-1 situation. The trajectory is not always very linear. A lot of times coordinators are just great coordinators and they don't always make great head coaches, and that's okay. Go even look at a guy like Steve Sarkisian, right? He was a really, really good offensive coordinator, struggled at USC, struggled at Washington, went and spent time as an analyst with Nick Saban, then was the offensive coordinator with them. And now he's a totally different head coach. So it's not always a linear trajectory for these guys as coordinators to become great head coaches. Also, when you're the head coach at Indiana, like, what are the expectations? Now, the offenses were really good at Indiana. They put up a lot of yardage with the Hoosiers. So don't just poo-poo this idea because the head coaching record was not great. You're not bringing him here to be a head coach. You're bringing him here for his offensive mind. And over the last 20 years, he has done a lot as an offensive mind at the collegiate level. He's put up big, big numbers at several different stops in several different conferences. So I like the hire. I think it's going to be good for Oklahoma. It's going to play out very interestingly. And I think the idea that Ben Arbuckle could be one and done with Oklahoma might make this part of the reason you bring him in, or at least 2 years and done. If Oklahoma's offense goes and has great seasons the next 2 years and Arbuckle follows, Jeff Lebby into a head coaching job, it wouldn't surprise me if Kevin Wilson gets a shot as the offensive coordinator. I know Oklahoma fans will hate to hear that because they'll think it's just another buddy hire, but Kevin Wilson's got the skins at least a little bit more so than Seth Luttrell. So is there a new playoff format coming? Could it mean 9 games in an SEC schedule for the Sooners coming forward? We'll discuss coming up next year on Locked On Sooners.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get into the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Like, I love looking at what FanDuel's got going on. Like, for example, Heisman Trophy odds. Our guy John Mateer is sitting at plus 2,500, but there's also other bets you can do for the NBA, like for the Oklahoma City Thunder, even the Dallas Mavericks, LA Lakers. There's a lot of teams you can jump on, and I like jumping in late in the game, seeing if I can get into a little bit of the action before things close out. And you can do that with FanDuel. So all you got to do is go in right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. You want to interact with us more, just go subscribe to the Locked On Sooners Insider Program by texting Sooners to 405-817-6711. That's Sooners to 405-817-6711, where we'll answer your questions. We'll chat with you about all things Oklahoma Sooners and may or may not drop a little inside tidbit.
A little something.
Ask us the
You never
questions. We might have a little something sometimes. Again, 405-817-6711. Jay, there might be a new college football playoff format coming in the near future. We know that the current contract runs through 2025. After that, it's anybody's guess as to how this thing is going to look. There's a lot of discussion about a 14 team, a 16 team, and how that could impact future scheduling in the SEC. What do you make of this, Jay? Where do you think this is all going to end up?
They're going to add more games. There's so much money in college football right now to be made for all the fat cats up there in the suits at the top. There's just so much profits there available for them. And because of that, they're going to try their hardest to take advantage of this opportunity and add more games that kind of dilutes the fun and the competition of college football. I don't want more playoff teams, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable. And right now, like you mentioned, one of the big things that the push is to get the SEC to go to 9 games. I know that's been a big push by ESPN. It's been a big push by commissioner in a way, but the schools are kind of like, if we're going to do that, you got to pay up the money. They got to pay more money for us to give you one more game because that takes away from the non-con and all of that. Well, to fix a little bit of that, it sounds like the SEC and the Big Ten are also working on a scheduling format to where they play against each other a lot more, which gives you more marquee games. Sounds enticing, but it also requires a substantial amount of not only travel but cost when it comes to trying to buy tickets at these stadiums. I mean, I know that Michigan game is going to be absurd this year when they come to Norman this coming season. And then next season going to Ann Arbor. It's going to be dumb. Texas going to Ohio State. It's going to be ridiculous. But, I mean, that's what, the fans want. They want some of that stuff early in the season to go with late. But, John, I don't know how I feel about another shakeup in the playoffs again. I kind of want us to go back down. Can we go to like 8? Give us a little bit more meaning throughout the year? Or find a way to create a format where the playoffs encompass the conference championship to where when you get to the conference champion, they're the one left in the playoffs. That to me would be a lot better in comparison to what they're trying to do now.
Yeah, 12 this year just felt like it was about right, but maybe too many. When you go to 16, you're going to start seeing these 9-3 teams making the playoff. You're going to see Alabama or South Carolina from this past season in the playoff. Now, that could have been more exciting because you had maybe a South Carolina team that was trending in a really good direction, just beat Clemson, a team that did make the playoff. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how this is all playing out. There's discussion about 4 automatic bids for the SEC, 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten. And I don't know if I love that necessarily because, okay, yes, are these the 2 stronger conferences in college football? Sure. Are they going to beat up on each other in conference? Absolutely. If we're having a Big Ten SEC scheduling agreement down the road, is there going to be more beating up Yeah, you're going to see teams that are going to take more L's than they might normally in conference play, especially if the SEC is going to have a 9-game SEC schedule. You're just creating a much more difficult schedule. And if you're Oklahoma, you should never be afraid of that. You're Oklahoma. At the same time, it's going to create some 4-loss teams where you're like, man, how'd they get 4 losses? But they still might be one of the better teams in the country. It's just that the schedule is that tough. So, but I don't love the idea of the automatic bids, just because I need a little bit more flexibility. When there's 134 teams in the FBS level, and you're telling me that you're guaranteeing 4 of those spots to the SEC, 4 of those spots to the Big Ten, that seems a little rich for me. I think 2 or 3, I think guarantee everybody 2, and then the rest of it can be, we'll just see how it all lands.
Yeah, that's kind of a level-headed take on it, because that's what I want as well. I would prefer for us to play in that format, but here's the problem, John. Does that bring in money?
I mean, the networks are going to want the money. The conferences are going to want the money. It's all going to come down to that. And listen, I know people hate where college football is now because they say it's all about the money. Well, for 40 years, it's been all about the money.
It's always been about the money.
Ever since Oklahoma sued and got their rights, their broadcast rights, the ability to sell their broadcast rights, it changed the landscape of college football. And so for the last 40 years, we've seen this evolution take place to where administrators have to think about the bottom line and what it's going to mean for their program. And in this new era where rev sharing is going to be a part of it, and schools have to figure out a way to not only pay their football players, but pay their non-rev athletes as well. These ADs, these presidents, these conference directors, these conference presidents or commissioners, I guess is the terminology, they have to look at that bottom line as well. And it sucks because it takes some of the quote unquote purity out of the sport, the amateur athleticism out of the sport that people loved for many, many years. But this is better for the players because they're actually getting some compensation for the money that they make the universities beyond the scholarships. I think as somebody who was for playoff expansion, I think getting to 16 and saying automatically 4 SEC teams have to be in, automatically 4 Big Ten teams have to be in, is just too rich for my blood.
Yeah, it's too many games too. Like, I want these games to be done. Like, I put it this way. I am not for the Rose Bowl being the site for the national championship. This isn't baseball. This isn't softball where you can play 2 or 3 games in a day and have multiple games within a week and stack it up, where that makes sense to do that in one location. That's cool because, I mean, even just like an NCAA tournament, basketball, you can do that same thing. You can play more than one game in a week and be okay. You can't do that in football. So it's not fun for the Rose Bowl to be the final spot. I like that moved around so everybody has different places they can visit or whatnot if their team makes it. That's what makes it fun. But I do like the idea of the college football season being done New Year's Day. That would be awesome if we could find a way to format this to where the season is done around the 1st, or at least that week, the week of the 1st. Make it done. Have the national championship on a Saturday, please.
Yes.
That would be amazing for us to be able to do that. Because if you have it on a Saturday, you really are going to get some eyeballs. You're really going to get people, because Monday night's terrible.
Yep.
Ratings are going to be there because people are going to be at home watching it. Those that are going to be able to travel will travel. But you put it on a Saturday, people are really going to party.
Yeah.
It's going to be an entire day. It's going to be like the Super Bowl. It's going to be a spectacle. It's going to be a thing where people plan their entire weekend around this. Now we're trying to figure out, am I taking off work on Monday? If it's my team, I'm going to take off Monday and Tuesday and watch the game. But if it's not my team, no, you want to make it to where everybody makes this an entire event. The Super Bowl's an entire event regardless of whose team is in there. You either hate watching or you're watching with love or you're watching out of neutrality. You want to do that same thing for college football, and you can't do that having that game on Monday nights every year. Get rid of that. That's got to go. But I would like for it to be done by New Year's. Yeah,
that's got to go. The idea that a national championship game can be played the last week of January, you got to get that out of here. Throw that in the trash. It's got to be I understand the 1st of January, you want it to be finished. That's fine. I'm fine with the second weekend. Like if you want to have all your New Year's Day, bowl games still a part of the college football playoff and have your semifinal games on the 31st and the 1st, and then finish it that next weekend, by all means, I'm good with that. But by that second weekend of January, you're done. College football is finished. And for those who are concerned about competing with the NFL, you do that all throughout the season anyway, right? Because you're playing on Thursday nights. You're trying to get eyeballs in the wintertime and really in December when the NFL goes to Saturday games. Who cares? Who cares that the NFL is playing alongside you? Your product is strong enough that people are going to tune in because it's college football and it is still a very, very valuable product. So I'm not concerned about it. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out because playoff expansion is not done. They're going to go to 14 or 16 at some point, and the SEC is probably going to be locked in at 9 games in their schedule, which is going to create an interesting dynamic. What they do, are they going to go back to that 3 permanent opponents? Are they going to go back to divisions? What are they going to do with their scheduling format? Because the way it was the first year of expanded SEC, I don't think it's going to be sustainable long term.
Agreed.
Coming up, we're going to discuss what Oklahoma's weekend that looked like. It was great for some, not so great for others. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We're going to start on a high note, Jay. Let's talk Oklahoma softball because, man, they had another great weekend. 4-0 in the Getterman Classic down in Waco. 4 run rule wins, outscored their opponents by a large margin and capped it off with Sam Landry's perfect game on Sunday in an 8-0 win over Baylor.
The Sooners are 10-0 on the season and half their wins are by run rule. There were a lot of questions coming into this season about can this team go? Because this is what 4P going for a 5th. Is it a possibility? Will they have the talent for it, especially in the pitching? That has been like the biggest. It's like the only thing I saw on social media. And I don't even know a lot about softball. I know enough to be dangerous and enjoy it. I go to some games out there and love when it's warmer. I'm not going in the cold. I'm sorry. I don't like the cold like that. I like the cold, but I don't like the cold to be sitting outside in the cold. But I digress. But just watching the way that they dominate, 10-0, 86 runs to 15 runs in their 10 games. John, that's absurd.
Yeah.
They're just putting up more records and more experience out there. And then the pitching has actually been a big strength.
Yeah, so far, this team is a young team. I mean, a lot of freshmen are getting a lot of time on this team, and your sophomores, Cassidy Pickering, Ella Parker, are kind of the leaders on your team. You have one significant senior in Sydney Sanders, who is hitting really, really well right now. But this past weekend, Ella Parker continued to mash. Like, just every single game, she is the instigator, the initiator for the Oklahoma Sooners offense. In their win in every game this weekend, she had a hit in the first inning. That's just how important she is to the top of the lineup. She's hitting almost 650 on the season after hitting 750 this weekend. Just extra base hit machine. Sydney Parker, true freshman, had a tremendous weekend. She had 11 RBIs and 5 extra base hits, including a grand slam that helped Oklahoma get the run rule win in the first game against Baylor. And again, like you mentioned, the pitching, there have been some ups and downs so far to start this season, but as a unit, this group is pitching really, really well. They're only allowing 1.6 runs per game so far through 10 games. They had the kind of San Diego State was the one that got to them a little bit in that opening weekend. They hit them for 6 runs, and we're seeing what San Diego State's been capable of this last week. As they've knocked off Alabama, they've knocked off Missouri, they beat Wichita State, 3 significant wins over teams that'll be in the NCAA tournament. So Oklahoma Sooner softball, man, they're going to continue to get tested. I mean, they're going to have bigger tests ahead of them when they get to SEC play. But so far, through the first 10 games of the season, this team looks like a team that can continue to contend. On the hardwood, Jay, another rough loss for Porter Moser and the Oklahoma men's basketball team. Just absolutely demoralizing. You had a 5-point lead with 24 seconds to go, and you cannot pull out the win. Just unbelievable.
I was starting to feel awful for this, but I'm at this point. When are they going to fire Porter? Because it appears that even though the team's going to finish with a winning record, they're going to be invited to the NIT most likely. They cannot find a way to win the games that they need in order to progress forward. Because I talked about this on one of the shows last week when I was recording. The big thing for them is they had to win at least 4 of these games, these last 4 of their last like 9 games. They had to in order to even have an opportunity. And this Missouri game was one of those games that they should have won. Mm-hmm. How are you up? What was it, 5 with a 30-something seconds left? Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Missouri game. My apologies. Like, how do you have a lead and then lose at the end? Say LSU, you just should have won that game. Like, nothing about this team. They look terrible on the court. They don't look disciplined. They don't look like they know what they're doing. I don't know if they're running plays or not. It just feels like it's a bunch of ISO. I don't know. But at this point, I think we're done with Porter. I think I hate to say it. It's done. It's got to be. And even with the way he put this roster together and was able to bring together, getting Jeremiah Fears and everything, players leave and they kind of flourish other places too. It's not a good look. It's not a good look.
Yeah, sorry, I totally forgot about the Mizzou game as you were mentioning.
Yeah,
like that was another disappointing loss that you were just completely outclassed and outmatched in that one, and then you go to have the LSU game where you have a chance, and that was one you had to have. Like you had to have that game. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it because you have 5 games coming up against teams in the top 25. Your only 2 games against unranked opponents to finish the season were against LSU and Texas. You lost to LSU. Texas beat you earlier in the year. And these next 5 coming up against ranked opponents. I mean, you have a chance. There's a chance that you could finish on a terrible losing streak. Yep. And I'm not generally one to sit here and call for people to be fired, but it's time to move on. Like it's going to be time to move on. They may let them finish out the season, but it's going to be a total reset for Oklahoma basketball. It's uninspired play. They look frenetic. Porter Moser looks frenetic on the sideline. He doesn't look under control. The team doesn't look under control in key moments, and they turn the ball over way too much. They don't have enough guys that can handle the basketball. Jeremiah Fears, Dayton Forsythe, that's about all the guys that you have that you feel comfortable handling the basketball. Jalen Moore to an extent, but outside of that, guys are just kicking the ball off their foot way too often, and they don't seem to have a plan a lot of the times. If the first shot's not there, they don't have a secondary option. And when they're not hitting their shots, there's nothing that the offense can do. It's too reliant on the 3 ball. And even when they rebound well, they can't take advantage of it because they can't shoot consistently enough. It's just not a good basketball team. And I totally understand why people aren't wanting to show up. Listen, I live 3 hours away. I'm not going to sit here and throw stones at folks for not showing up to watch Oklahoma basketball on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. I totally understand. There's a lot that people have going on. At the same time, your team's got to win. If you want to put people in the seats, the best way to do it is to provide inspired play. And so far through 3+ seasons, almost 4 years, this coaching staff, the Oklahoma Sooners that we've watched on the court have not provided that inspired play. Maybe it's the fact that there's been so much turnover on the roster. Nobody knows who to get excited about because every season of the Porter Moser era, there's been this great transfer portal turnover, and it hasn't turned out to be successful enough to lead to wins.
No, and you're 100% right there. That's the hard part is though, even with college basketball is if you get a good enough player, they're going to only last a year anyway. That's what you're hoping for. You need to get at least 1, maybe 2 one and done guys potentially, or at least 1. You got to have at least 1 face of one and done that can come in and, not be here longer than, that 1 season. They're not going to be beyond that because you're going to need really good players in order to get deep runs into the NCAA tournament. But at the same time, just like you mentioned, you need a coach that can at least find a way to retain some players too. Try to get yourself some juniors and seniors that have talent that may not be ready for the league, but can at least stick around and help to get you there because that's what you desperately need. That's the most important thing that you have here if you want to get fans to sit their butts down and watch the games. I mean, look at the women. They're out here still playing with life. That big win against Missouri, they were down at one point, and then he went in and blew them out 82-66. Beautiful game by them. They're balling. They're balling hard. Now, they're not the tops of the SEC because the SEC is very, very top heavy with teams, but they're still inspired play, just as you mentioned. The men aren't giving us that at all. Like, it just doesn't feel like they care for the most part. Now, I mean, I know they're trying, and I know they're putting in effort because still, no matter what, a lot of them are still have aspirations to go to the league, so they still have to put the effort in, but the coaching just isn't there to help. And so they got some work to do on that. At this point, like I said, it's time to move on from Porter.
Well, and where it comes to for me is you can't be up there at the podium slamming fans for not showing up and then perform the way that you perform.
Yeah.
Fans are going to start tuning you out. You know, like they don't want to watch a team turn the ball over 18 times and then have the finger pointed at them, at the fans.
Yep.
Like that's not how you rally a fan base, in my opinion. The way you rally a fan base is the way I feel Jenny Baranczyk has, right? Like I feel like she's done a good job at promoting her girls, promoting her team, promoting women's basketball, trying to encourage people to come out and not just because it's a rivalry game or whatever. She just wants people to come out and watch the team.
Yep.
At the same time, she's created a brand of basketball that's fun to watch. It's exciting to watch. They get up and down the floor. They will take as many shots as they possibly can in a game. It's very much alike to the Dallas Mavericks of the early 2000s under Don Nelson. Is up-tempo basketball where we're going to play a fast pace and play exciting brand. Just not feeling that right now with Porter Moser. And they've got to, this next hire, they got to figure out how to create a brand of basketball that's going to be entertaining for the fans to want to come out to Norman to watch. For better or for worse, there's competition in town with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and you got to figure out a way to attract an audience to partake in that. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in, being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams and read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer.
Sooner.